So good morning all of you. Today we are going to start with or continue the essay Tradition and the Individual Talent by T.S. Eliot, the second part. Okay, we finished off up to the first portion. I told you we have this essay getting divided into 3 compartments, but for the sake of explanation we have divided the paragraph so that it is easy for us to refer to certain one after another. So paragraph number 8 we stopped with the part 1 comes to an end with the paragraph 8 paragraph divisions as well. So now we will start from section 2. We are continuing from section 2 with the paragraph number 9. You can see that paragraph starting with the honest criticism. Okay, honest criticism and sensitive appreciation is directed not upon the poet but upon the poetry. So of course we are talking about tradition, how to look back at the past, not with anger but with a kind of we are taking it as a reference point to make us with the effort we have to get this tradition, notion of the tradition as well as the historical sense and awareness of the past. Fine. So here Eliot says, honest criticism and sensitive appreciation is directed not upon the poet but upon the poetry. Now he is going to talk about the way you have to look at past or poetry or whatever, and the work of art while appreciation, while being in the process of appreciation. It should not be directed upon the poet but upon the poetry. So of course we have this tendency, whenever we have a work at hand, we have something at hand for appreciation, we have the tendency to starting our analysis with the sentence, such and such work written by this and this poet, and then you have an elaborate introduction on the poet instead of the book. This is a tendency of the reading public to go on in that way, to go in this way. So that should not be the way. That's what Eliot says. Later poets, literary theories of course emphasizes this point. You know how text only becomes important, how depth of the author is declared with the post-structuralism and all. Depth of the author, it's not the physical depth, but you no longer have to be worried about what they are or how they lived or what their mental and moral condition had been while writing a text, writing a work. So this is the way criticism takes a different turn later, but Eliot is not that postmodernist critic. He is just a modernist. Still in the process of appreciation, obviously we know to make it more genuine. Appreciation, analysis, whatever it may be, if you are having a work of art at hand, it is really good and necessary and preferable that the appreciation is directed upon the poet, not upon the poet but upon the poetry. Okay, not upon the poet but upon the poetry. That means poetry in general signifies any kind of work of art that you have to appreciate or analyze, whatever it may be. And if we attend to the confused cries of the newspaper critics and the sorrows of popular repetition that follows, we shall hear the names of poets in great numbers. If we seek not blue book knowledge but the enjoyment of poetry and ask for poem, we shall seldom find it. So that is the influence of the new media and the new tendency in even nowadays we can see. Instead of the work of art you have at hand, we have the tendency to go in search of the details of the writers, to appreciate them, to making it a point of praise or to shower the praise upon the person, and you are subordinating the poetry as such or the writing as such. Next sentence is very important. I have tried to point out. I means the Eliot himself. I have tried to point out the importance of the relation of the poem to other poems by other authors. You see, very complicated a sentence. I have tried to point out the importance of relation of the poem to other poems by other authors. So, one poem, if you take a poem named A, you can be another poem B and C by the same author, but you have number of other poems by many other writers. So he says that we have to make a comparison between or among the poems of other writers, other poems of other writers, and suggested the concept of poetry as a living whole. Very important an idea. The concept of poetry as a living whole of all the poetry that has ever been written. Of course, you cannot finish off reading all the poetry ever been written till date in the process of your reading or attempt to understand one poem. That is not needed or that is not possible. But to realize that this is there, such a vast collection of poetry, vast collection of writing that is already there, you have to take it in mind. The other aspect of this impersonal theory of poetry. Why impersonal? Personal means you are giving importance to personal traits, maybe of the poet, the writer. But here, of course, in the beginning itself, Eliot says it should not be directed upon the poet, but upon the poetry. So, of course, this is an impersonal theory of impersonal theory of poetry is the relation of the poem to its author and its author. The other aspect of this impersonal theory of poetry is the relation of the poem to its author. Impersonal theory. Even though you know this is the poet, he or she wrote it, but still you are not fully locating it in the personal context or the historical context of the writer. Of course, you cannot. He doesn't declare the death of the author. Please don't mistake. That is only with the post-structuralism the declaration of the death of the author and all comes. Come. But here it is Eliot, modernist. Of course, they have the nostalgia for the past, but there is a kind of different approach in reading he attempts at. Okay. And I hinted by an analogy that the mind of the mature poet differs from that of the immature one, not precisely in any valuation of personality, not being necessarily more interesting or having more to say, but rather by being a more finely perfected medium in which special or very varied feelings are at liberty to enter into new combinations. Don't worry, I will explain it simply. So that part talks about the theory of impersonality he is going to introduce. Okay, so that is again the mind of the mature poet. He tries to make, of course, at this point you please keep in mind, as I have been referring between this, shifting the reference between death of the author and Eliot's concepts, you may be confused. So that part, death of the author or whatever that is actually talking about the reading process. But here Eliot is talking about the writing process itself. First thing you have to keep in mind. So please keep aside this Roland Barthes and death of the author concept for the time being. Of course, now we are going to talk about the writing process, in which he tries to make a distinction. Eliot tries to make a distinction between the mature poet and the immature poet. Of course, mature poet differs from that of the immature poet in their approach, in their attitude, the dealing of the subject matter. Everywhere you can see, of course, the maturity is something very positive as such. So he says, the mind of the mature poet. He is going to get us an analogy. I told you we are going to have a scientific discussion. Don't worry, it's not about something formal or anything you have to learn, but you have to understand how Eliot brings us an analogy. Analogy means you are taking something. for comparison, contrast, and it's you keep it as an example so that you can easily understand some other idea. Something immediately connected or something which is not at all immediately connected, but you get an easy understanding of matters. That's what I mean by analogy. Sometimes we take very simple examples that also, if you want, you can take us. But here it is a kind of science oriented, and you will get a clear picture now. But before that, we have to see this analogy with mature poet. How the mature poet differs from that of the immature one. It is not at all something related with the personality. That is the first thing. A mature person is always a good one, very humble, very understanding with vast knowledge, and an immature poet is not that kind. That is not at all the case. That is the first thing you have to understand. This maturity in creativity doesn't have anything to do with the person, the poet as a person. That is the main thing. So that personality, of course, that is highlighted within quotes, not being necessarily more interesting or having more to say, but rather by being a more finely perfected medium. This is the point. Please mark down. So if you have a note or something, you just note it down. Perfectly, that is more finely perfected a medium. Their mind is, the creative mind is something entirely different. Of course, every time you say, most often, you cannot assess the poet, you cannot assess a person's life with what they write often. Some person, of course, write it with all the kind of open-mindedness. Some of them make it something highly connected with their life. Confessional poets are there, autobiographical writers are there, but that is something entirely different. That doesn't come to this picture at all. Here Eliot talks about purely some kind of course he is trying to deal with the medium of poetry, writing, creative space in a person's mind. That can be either of a mature kind or an immature kind. A very good human being, very good natured person, if sitting to write poetry, may not be able to bring something very fruitful as it is done by a person who is not at all very good natured or very authentic or very approachable person, but the writing may be very good and very appreciable. So that is again a point. That means, of course, we have this tendency every time we remind people, please don't judge the work of please don't try to keep this poet and their work, please don't try to assess the personality of the poet with the writing he or she comes up with. Okay, so that is the point at which he talks about this personality and theory of impersonality. He is warning us against this concept of maturity in a person and the maturity in a poet. That means when he or she sits down to write, his nature, his essential nature, if you want to say, as a person, human being, doesn't affect the creative process. That's what he says. Okay, it is just a medium where you may have a lot of creative impulse, creative space, and you have a more creative tendency there, so that the person may be able to rival any other good poet, any other good natured persons who are also budding writers, but the other one may be able to excel and bring out more creative works. Hope you got the point. Theory of impersonality ആണ് പറയുന്നത്. അതിൽ പറഞ്ഞ എന്താണ്, ഒരു പോയറ്റ് ഒരാള് അവരുടെ നേച്ചർ, അവര് ഭയങ്കര മെച്ചുവേർഡ് ആയിട്ടുള്ള ഒരാളാണ് എന്നതുകൊണ്ട് മാത്രം അവരെഴുതുന്ന പോയട്രി നമ്മൾക്കത് മെച്ചുവേർഡ് ആവണം എന്നില്ല. അപ്പൊ അവരുടേതായ ഒരു പേഴ്സണാലിറ്റി നമ്മളെ ക്രിയേറ്റീവ് റൈറ്റിങ്ങിന് കൂടുതലായിട്ട് ബാധിക്കില്ല. ഭയങ്കര ഇമ്പോർട്ടൻ്റ് ആയിട്ടുള്ള ഒരു തിയറിയാണിത്. കാരണം വി ഹാവ് ദ ടെൻഡൻസി, നമ്മളെപ്പോഴും പറയും, ഒരു വർക്ക് ഓഫ് ആർട്ട് കണ്ടിട്ട് റൈറ്ററിനെ അസസ് ചെയ്യരുത്. സംടൈംസ് they declare perfectly that this is my autobiography. Autobiography എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞിട്ടൊരു ran തന്നെയാണ്. There is a rana, there's a kind of type of writing. That is, let them write in that way. But there is a tendency for the people to find out the elements of something autobiographical in some fictions and all they write. That is very difficult for the writers to tackle down. But of course, there may be elements, but they do not declare it. They do not say that yes, we have this and this. This is my story. This and that is that character. I meant that character with me. That is, if unless and until they declare it in an authentic mode, in the mode of preface or something, you do not have to be in search of such traits. You can read that work as a free media, free material. That is, you can take the work as it is. So that is the point at which he talks about this impersonality. Mature poetic creative mind is something entirely different from the personality of the poet. Okay. So then to paragraph number 10. The analogy was that of the catalyst. So in part 1, the end, he refers about taking us to this analogy. Analogy is the pronunciation. Please don't be confused. Analogy. Catalyst. What do I mean by catalyst? Catalysts are kind of chemicals. In chemistry, we come across this catalysts and all. When elements are combined in lab and all, we have some science experiments and in the chemistry lab and the science lab, and we sometimes see elements getting combined in test tubes or some tumblers and all. The catalysts are some kind of chemical materials. Hope you know it is the term, Malayalam term is catalyst term. I will get the term anyway to you. We studied it. Forgot that. Sorry. Let me continue with this analogy of the catalyst, where two gases are mixed. That is, this SO2 and O2. Hope you can see that on the board. SO2 and O2. Sulfurous acid. To get the oxygen and sulfur dioxide plus oxygen, you get sulfurous acid. Are mixed in the presence of a filament. Only this you get. This one you get. That is the sulfurous acid. The product you get only if that is in the presence of a filament of platinum. That is why platinum is taken as the catalyst. They form sulfurous acid. That is the product. This combination takes place only if the platinum is present. See the, nevertheless, the newly formed acid contains no trace of platinum. That is the main thing you have to keep in mind before our going to the creative process and how we are going to talk about this process of creativity, process of creating poetry. We will have the explanation in connection with this platinum and the lack of this trace of platinum here. There is no trace of platinum at all in the product. The final product of SO2 and O2 combinedly you are getting sulfurous acid, sulfur dioxide and oxygen combined to form sulfurous acid in the presence of a platinum rod filament of platinum. If only if it is present, it will be the sulfurous acid you will get as the product, but the product doesn't have any trace of this platinum. Okay. And the platinum itself is apparently unaffected. See, the platinum also doesn't have any change because of this process. That is also very important. This process, the whole scientific process. Sometimes we talk about some scientific process where the elements which are the change. Of course, SO2 and O2. After forming sulfurous acid, you do not have that separately there. But platinum doesn't have any change at all. It has remained inert neutral. It is neutral, but it enhances the speed of this combination. That is the task or the importance of this catalyst. Their role in such combinations as is the chemical combination is itself. That itself is the task or the role of this catalyst. So platinum is obviously the catalyst in this combination, in this scientific process, in this chemical process. Okay, has remained inert and neutral and unchanged. Of course, you know, it is unchanged. We can take that as such without having any chemical changes, without changing any of its qualities. You can take the filament back. The mind of the poet is the shred of platinum. That is why I wrote down in that way. How does it, instead of SO2 we have emotion, instead of O2 we have feeling. You can reverse that, no problem. Emotions and the feelings of a poet. Those are the elements which are getting combined to form the poetry, the final product, poetry. Where we got sulfurous acid in the chemical process combination, you have in the creative combination with emotions and feelings in a poet, giving birth to poetry. But and instead of platinum, that catalyst, you have the poet's mind itself as the catalyst. That is the medium in which this process, the combination takes place. But it may partly or exclusively operate upon the experience of the man himself. Maybe partly, of course, these emotions and feelings or those may be having something to do with. But the more perfect the artist, the more completely separate in him will be the man who suffers and the mind that creates. We are talking about the matured poets, where the emotions and feelings, the man, the personal problems or personal happiness, whatever it may be. Emotions and feelings can be of any kind, not only something negative and say pathetic or somewhere disturbing, but something of a very positive note as such. Whatever it may be, the more the poet is, the less he or she is affected by these emotions and feelings in the creative process. That mind doesn't change. Poet's mind doesn't take it for granted. The emotions and feelings, when I am writing a poetry, I write the poem. So my mind is needed for these two aspects, like emotions, feelings, to get a combination, proper space for those to be combined. But of course, emotions and feelings may be of a very personal kind. Still, if the person is a matured poet, that mind is not affected with the combination of the poetic combination. He or she remains the same. But the more the perfect the artist, the more completely separate in him will be the man who suffers and the mind which creates. The more perfectly will the mind digest and transmit the passion which are its material. These passions are for the time being. If the poet depends upon these emotions and feelings for the writing of the poetry, those are the elements of his creativity also. So in between the writing process, if the poet sits down like in a depressive state, oh, I had to suffer all this, I had to go in this way, I have to be in this way, my life is all scattered, flat. If the person is still getting affected by writing, of course that poetic process will be affected. You cannot insist that should not happen. You cannot assure it like with a percentage assurance in the case of a scientific process. You cannot say that the mind of the poet should not be having any impact with this emotion. But a mature poet, Eliot is talking at the extreme. the mature, the creativity at its peak, where emotions and feelings, even though it has a lot to do with the poet and the personality and his or her life, right? That is not affecting the person, mind of the poet. So he remains unchanged, she remains unchanged, and a poem gets birth. So this is the way he talks about this analogy with that much detail. So with that scientific formula, you can easily understand what Eliot means by this emotions feelings. At a normal plane, when if you talk like emotions and feelings should not affect a poet, while you may think that why? Because many poets, many write creative works get birth out of the problems, sufferings, all those faced by the poets. Mainly creative persons, creative writers, most often you might come across, they are talking about their sufferings and all bring more creativity in them. So that's again, you cannot generalize, but still that is also a half of the picture. And this is again, you can see on the board, SO2 plus O2 combining in the presence of platinum to form sulfurous acid. Sulfur dioxide and oxygen combining in the presence of a platinum filament to form sulfurous acid. In the same way, here in the creative process, your emotions and feelings in a poet, in a person, in a human being's mind, that combining to form poetry, but the medium, the platinum rod, instead of platinum you have the poet's mind as the medium of the combination. So that as platinum is not affected by the combination, or the final product doesn't have anything to do with the platinum. You can see platinum is PT, but the other one is SO3, SO4. Sulfuric acid, sulfurous acid. So of course PT, that PT is the short form to refer to the elements are having such a form. The scientific representations are there in the table. So, and you can see there is no trace, you can set back with the platinum there. In the same way, emotions and feelings and the poetry doesn't have anything to do with the poet's mind. You can see I have encircled it, that PT platinum and the poet's mind have kept in circle to get how these things have to be understood in as an analogy. You can get the idea clear. Okay, yes. Paragraph number 11. The experience, you will notice the elements which enter the presence of the transforming catalyst are of two kinds. The same thing, the continuation actually. Emotions and feelings, yeah, this is just about reading, so we will be able to finish off in the time allotted. The effect of a work of art upon the person who enjoys it is an experience different in kind from any experience not of art. The effect of a work of art upon the person who enjoys it is an experience different in kind from any experience not of art. So reading and getting pleasure out of it, or out of an art you are getting a kind of pleasure, and some other pleasures are there when you are going for a video game. It is not something very artistic. Of course, some element, the creativity of a person's mind, of course, brings forth these apps and games, maybe. But directly, if you take the traditional artistic forms and structures, there is a difference in the kind of enjoyment that you get from one and the other kind. It may be formed out of one emotion, or may be a combination of several and various feelings. That is emotions and feelings. Or may be a combination of several and various feelings inherent for the writer in particular words or phrases or images, may be added to compose the final result. That is it. So feelings, the writer with a lot of feelings, emotions and images, imagination power All these combine and composed to form the combine together to get the final result, that is the poetry. Poetry in general, that signifies artistic works in general. You should not think that other works of art doesn't come under, but do not come under. But that is the main thing here about the poetry. Referring to any artistic work, you please keep in mind. Or great poetry may be made without the direct use of any emotion whatever, composed out of feelings only. So, or great poetry may be made without the direct use of any emotion whatever, composed out of feelings only. Without having emotion, feelings only, with that also you can. So it depends. You cannot always say that emotions, feelings. What is the difference? Emotions, feelings. Very subtle. It is very subtle. Sukshmana difference. Emotions, feelings, how those are those how they are different. You just think about that. So very philosophical, and you just think about the difference between. Okay. Now it is just about our Canto 15 of the Inferno is a working up of the emotion evident in the situation, but the effect, though single as that of any work of art, is obtained by considerable complexity in detail. The last quatrain gives an image, a feeling attaching to an image, which did not develop simply out of what precedes, but which was probably in suspension of the poet's mind until the proper combination arrived for it to add itself to. See, Canto, Inferno. Inferno is the work, and the Canto, Khandangal. Khandagavya. Sometimes we talk about. See, as you do not know about the work, we do not have to go into the details, but with this reference Eliot goes to his theoretical frame that I will read out for you. The poet's mind is, in fact, that is the main point. Please keep the presentation there. Take back the file, very urgent. The last part, that is very important. The poet's mind is, in fact, a receptacle for seizing and storing up numberless feelings, phrases, images, which remain there until all the particles which can unite to form a new compound are present together. Very important. The poet's mind is, that is the main thing. Inferno, whether written in this way or that, that's any work, any writing combination can be explained, taken as an example and explained that yes, it is a work that is unknown to you. I do not have to go into it. Anyway, I also do not have much idea about. Still, we can talk about this analogy and the combination. The poet's mind is in fact a receptacle for seizing and storing up numberless feelings. Any person may be having a lot of feeling, a lot of emotions, imagination, word combination, phrases in the mind that remain there until all the particles which can unite to form a new compound are present together. So, a poetic process. Of course, whenever you have a feeling, emotion, even though you are a creative writer, you do not write all of a sudden. We have a different take on the part of Wordsworth about the same thing. Emotions, recollected in tranquility, spontaneous overflow of emotions. Recollected in tranquility. You have a kind of picture there also available to you. So here Eliot talks about the same or in a different way. You cannot always mix up these writers and their concept together, but Eliot talks about the process of creativity with these emotions and feelings. When the combination, when it has a perfect medium, perfect state of mind in the mind of the poet, all these are residing there. All these emotions, feelings, images, ideas, all those are there. But when a desirable moment comes, that you can talk. So when it strikes you at your creative peak, then you sit down to write poetry. So that is the point at which you can talk about the introduction of platinum. Even though you keep SO2 and O2 for some 1 or 2 days together in the same tumbler, beaker, you will not be having the combination taking place. That's what they say. In science, they say that this sulfurous acid will not wouldn't form. But once platinum is introduced, immediately the process starts. So the same way, emotions, feelings, every day we have different experiences, some feelings connected with that, some emotions connected with that. But every 24/7 you are not sitting to write down poetry. When the mind is perfectly fine to go for a creative work, creative writing, you sit down and write. So the same thing was told by Eliot with this analogy. He gives this idea clear, makes this idea clear. So that's all with the paragraph number 11 of the essay. Wait.